Hello and welcome to my PowerPoint about My Hero Academia and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Um, I am mostly going to be talking about the My Hero Academia ending of the manga, and I'm going to be talking about it in relation to Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood's ending. If you've seen my anime wraps, you know how much anime I watch. So I will be talking about these shows particularly first, and I'll be talking about some other shows as well, which I will tell you about later. But um, yeah, the My Hero Academia ending, or the manga just ended, so I had a lot of thoughts and feelings about it, so I'm talking about it here. Okay, so we are living in a really interesting time for anime right now. Several of the big juggernauts of popularity have finished this year and last. Attack on Titan, Jujutsu Kaisen, and now My Hero Academia. Demon Slayer is ending as well soon. I know it's different because Attack on Titan's anime finished last year, and Demon Slayer's anime is ending soon. Whereas Jujutsu Kaisen still has a bit to go in the anime, and so does My Hero. But Demon Slayer's ending or manga ended a bit before the anime, whereas Attack on Titans, I feel like ended only maybe like a year or two before the show ended. Um, but yeah, it just feels like a lot of these really popular shows have been ending a lot recently. Um, and then, especially with My Hero and Jujutsu Kaisen's mangas ending so close together, I think it was like a month apart. And honestly, I was underwhelmed by both. But I feel the need to state that I still think of both positively. Jujutsu Kaisen more than My Hero Academia. But I think both have really good ideas and characters. So when both ended, I had to, of course, percolate on the endings and figure out why they weren't what I wanted. I'm going to be talking about My Hero here, but it is interesting that both ended so close together and were both so popular. I'm also having a lot to say about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, so spoilers for the My Hero Academia manga, Fullmetal Alchemist, the Hunter x Hunter manga, Haikyuu, and Avatar: The Last Airbender. So if you don't want any of those series spoiled, then don't watch this. I will also normally give recaps for stuff that I'm talking about in these PowerPoints that I do, but I don't do that here. I explain myself, but I am kind of writing these with the assumption that you know what I'm talking about. So yeah. Okay, so I started a rewatch of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood recently because that show had just been on my mind, and as I'm watching it, I'm like, yeah, the show is really good. But that's old news. Everybody knows that. What really got me thinking with this rewatch is its comparisons to the My Hero Academia ending and the similarities and differences between Edward and Deku. The My Hero manga had recently ended at the time of my rewatch, and I found myself not really liking the My Hero ending. I wasn't really invested in the final fight between Deku and Shigaraki, really only skimming the new chapters that came out, like really for most of that final huge fight. Then when the fight got to the part where Deku gives Shigaraki his quirk so that the previous users could kill Shigaraki, overloading him with their power, I was like, hold on. What? I was patient though, because this very well could not be permanent. Lemillion got his powers back, Bakugo came back from the dead. Let's wait this out. And then the time skip came, and Deku was just a teacher at UA. No powers, watching his friends be heroes from the sidelines, alone, scarred, seemingly content with his life, but not what he had initially thought that his life was going to be. And I was like, wow, what the fuck? That's so lame. I couldn't quite pin down what about this ending felt really anticlimactic to me. It felt like Deku was being punished when he didn't deserve it. But I only had about half of an argument in my head. Jujutsu Kaisen was ending at the same time. I found that ending to be anticlimactic as well, and was putting more of my thinking power into that ending, though I'm not going to really be going into that here. Then I started my rewatch of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and it clicked. Horikoshi was taking the ending from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, but he didn't understand why that ending fundamentally worked. So I'm going to break it down here. Also, side note, these are panels from the final chapter of the manga. I know that this is from chapter 430. I know there's chapter 431, but at the time of me making this, there's only leaks for that out. There's no like official translation, so I'm not really including any of the stuff that happens in that new chapter. Like I've seen, the leaks on Twitter and stuff like that, but I just because there's no official translations, I'm just not going to talk about it yet, and I really don't think it's going to change too much of what I'm talking about here. But I'd also like to point out that, like, you see, this is really sad. Like, Todoroki is, like, he's really coming into his own, and, this panel is talking about him, you know, like, getting rid of the legacy of being Endeavor's son. And then there's a panel right below where Deku's like, yeah, I don't see my friends anymore. Like, they're too busy. It's like, Jesus. Oh my God. Like, that kind of sucks. I'm sorry, Deku. Oh my God. Okay, so throughout Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, we are shown really concrete consequences for people's actions. The law of equivalent exchange is the foundation for alchemy as a power system, and it is one that the audience is constantly aware of. It is impossible to create something out of nothing. If one wishes to obtain something, something of equal value must be given. It is a system with a very hard set of rules. There is very little wiggle room for interpretations of that law. The only people who are given some leniency with interpretation are the people who have met God, also called truth. We see Edward, Izumi, and eventually Alphonse be able to perform alchemy without a transmutation circle. They paid a higher price than most. Through committing the taboo of human transmutation and the additional cost of a body part, or a whole body in Al's case, they were able to gain a higher understanding of alchemy than most. However, truth determined that the cost that they paid was worth the information given, equivalent exchange. One of the most important things that Edward talks about is that there is no such thing as a painless lesson. Sacrifices are necessary. You can't gain anything without losing something first. Sacrifice is a core theme of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and it is one shown to the viewer constantly. Everything in that show is weighed against sacrifice. We also see that Ed especially is willing to sacrifice big if that means he can walk away. Like when he was stabbed with rebar after his fight with Kimberly, and he used his own lifespan as a fuel for the alchemy to heal himself, turning himself into a philosopher's stone. So when we get to the end of the show and we see Ed's final conversation with Truth, it makes sense. He sacrifices his knowledge and ability to do alchemy so that Al can get his body back. He is paying a big price, but he finally gets to achieve the goal that he and Al have been working towards the entire series. Ed and Al absolutely loved alchemy, so this is a big sacrifice. Al doesn't pay quite the price that Ed did. I think mostly because it was Ed who was credited with attempting human transmutation, and Al is kind of an accessory. But Al loses his whole body, and Ed sacrifices his arm in order to tie Al's soul to the suit of armor. So Al is still able to learn alchemy once he gets his body back. Ed's big sacrifice at the end of the day isn't even for his own benefit. Al is unable to make the sacrifice that Ed does because he doesn't have much to give up anymore. He already gave up his whole body. And Ed is doing all this so that his brother can live a normal life and he can undo the mistakes that he made as a child. Ed doesn't get his arm back, does get his arm back, but he never gets his leg back, which was the original price for human transportation for him. Ed doesn't get his whole body back. He loses his ability to perform alchemy, but this is still seen as a happy ending. Why? Because that was the goal that he had been working towards for the entire series. Ed loves alchemy, but he loves his brother more. He would give up absolutely everything for him. Their attempt at human transmutation as children has haunted Ed ever since it happened. Catharsis for Ed comes with him finally being able to give his brother his life back. So the sacrifices that Ed makes are not one that he feels any kind of resentment or anger about. He is absolutely at peace with the price he pays. He would do it again. But another component of this ending is that we see him and Winry end up together. We have watched their relationship throughout the entire show, and we are really rooting for the two of them to end up together. So now that Ed's sacrifice has been made, he gets to see his brother be happy. And he gets to be with the girl that he loves. So while Ed has paid a heavy price for his actions, it feels like a win because Ed achieves the goals that he has wanted for the entire series. So the ending is happy, it's cathartic, and feels fulfilling for the audience. So, Ed and Al, the whole show, are talking about that their whole goal is to get their bodies back. All they want is to get their bodies back. But for Ed, that's different from what it is for Al because, Al has his soul tied to, he doesn't have, he can't sleep, he can't eat. And, towards the later points in the show, Al's soul starts, rejecting from the suit of armor. So he pays a much higher price than Ed does, which means that in order to get their bodies back, Ed is the one who pays a higher price than Al. But it's they say that they want their bodies back, but really Ed just wants Al's body back. Obviously his arm and his leg would be nice, but if you know Ed, you know that he would, he would be perfectly fine if he didn't have his arm and his leg if Al got his body back. So, it's really Ed trying to get, make his brother happy again, make his brother be able to live a life again. So, why does Deku's ending not work quite as well? We have seen him throughout the entire series working to become a hero. All he wanted, ever since he was a child, was to be a hero. He wanted to be able to help people in the way that All Might did. He does not want the respect of his peers, mostly for them, or he does want this. He wants the respect of his peers, mostly for them to stop bullying him, but that is secondary to him wanting to do the good that All Might achieves. He puts his mind to it, putting in the work and the capacity that he can, and when he is given All Might's powers, his dream comes true. Now he can actually work to become what he wants to be. The toll on his body is worse than he was expecting, but it does not deter him for a second. He is doing what he loves, getting to be at UA and the hero program, something he never thought would be possible. He loves saving as many people as he possibly can, so when we get to the ending, it does make sense for Deku to make the sacrifice to save as many people as possible. It makes sense for his character that he would give away his powers to kill Shigaraki, but I do not like that it was asked of him. Deku is given his powers. He is the only person besides All Might to have this weight put on him of later in life quirk development and learning. He has to learn how to use his quirks, something his classmates did as toddlers, and keep up with the improvements that his classmates make to their quirks as well. But because of the way that One for All works, it is the only quirk that can be given away. Deku was asked to make a sacrifice that no one else in the world could even make. It feels like the story is punishing him for not being born with powers again. In the beginning, he is socially punished, but being bullied by people in his class, and now he's being punished for his quirk simply being the way that it is. He is asked to pay the price that no one else could, and then just walks away. Deku does not win here. He is not accomplishing the goals that he has for himself throughout the entire series. I would argue that I wouldn't call this ending tragic either, because the story frames it as a noble sacrifice, and he still gets to be at UA, so it's not tragic. If his goal was to kill Shigaraki first and be a hero second, then I would accept this, and then I would call this ending tragic. But because all he has ever wanted to be was to be a hero, this does not feel like a win. It feels like Deku is being punished for how he was born again. He can get a taste of hero life, but he will never be one of them. Because when the time comes, his self-sacrifice was needed, a sacrifice that someone born with power could not make. Deku does have the respect of his peers, but that's all. He is being punished now to be a teacher, to help others reach a future that he cannot have for himself. His former classmates think about him, but on a day-to-day basis, Deku is alone. I'd also like to point out that this is very different from All Might's sacrifice. All Might has been the symbol of peace for many years and had been the number one hero throughout all of this. All Might was severely injured. He was getting older anyway, and then his injury forced him to choose a successor. And the story does kind of do something interesting by making All Might sit on the sidelines and be okay with watching others save the day when he physically cannot anymore. It doesn't commit to this theme as hard as I wish it did. It really only comes up a couple times. But I mean that All Might got his time in the spotlight. He got to do good for many years. Statues were built of him. He will be remembered for long after his death. Deku didn't even get a full year with his powers before he had to give them up. He can't call his time as a hero his life's work like All Might can. I think Horikoshi saw the ending of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, saw how Ed sacrificed everything but was content with that sacrifice, and then that is ultimately seen as a win, and wanted to achieve that for his own story. But he could not do that inherently, even with the way that the powers work. Sacrifice is a huge theme in Fullmetal Alchemist. It is not as big of a theme in My Hero. We do still see sacrifice, but the core of My Hero's power system and ethos is about hard work. Hard work and dedication is what is rewarded in this world. Endeavor was a horrible father, and yet he is the number one hero because no one can doubt his dedication to getting stronger. He is barely punished for his abuse as a father. He is rewarded for working hard. All of the training and everything that we see is not focused on the concept of sacrifice. It is focused on dedication, kind of like a sports manga in that way. So when we get to an ending that is focused on the theme of sacrifice, it doesn't totally align with everything else that we have seen. And the sacrifice that Deku has to do does not ultimately feel like a win when the consequences are not positive. With Ed, it feels like everything he sacrificed was to achieve his goal. And then that it was worth it in the end. Deku sacrificed everything to avert disaster. It is simply not framed as positively, and Deku's life afterwards feels incomplete and kind of sad. Like, him being a teacher is not inherently a bad thing. I think that would be fine. But to not achieve the goal that he has been wanting for his entire life just makes me feel sad for him. I could see Deku feeling regret for how he handled it in his darkest moments. Like when he's alone at night in his 20s, I could see him thinking about maybe if there was another way to beat Shigaraki that wouldn't leave him powerless. I know that Ed does not regret his sacrifice for a single second. Another component of these two sacrifices is that Ed sacrificed his door for his brother. It wasn't for himself. It was directly for his brother, who he loves dearly. Deku's sacrifice was not for any direct benefit, it was to kill someone. While the world is a better place without Shigaraki in it, it still has the inherent piece of darkness to it. That is another element that makes it feel not quite as good for Deku as a character. Ed's sacrifice at its core was an act of love, while Deku's was an act of violence, which just doesn't seem fitting for Deku as a character. His final act with powers is killing someone, which again just don't feel right. In Fullmetal Alchemist, when Winry gets the gun to kill Scar and she can't do it, Ed tells her that it's because her hands were made to help, not to kill. I think that the same sentiment applies to Deku. He has too much goodness in his heart. He isn't meant to kill. Like, look at him. Like, that's a cartoon. Like, obviously all anime characters are cartoon characters, but like, look at Deku. Like, his big eyes and his smile and his hair. Like, that's not someone who should be forced to kill someone, And like, sure, you could get real technical if you want to get real granular. You could say that it wasn't technically Deku who killed them, that it was the previous users of All for One who, like, when he gave him the quirk, like, that it was actually the people from All for One who were, or for One for All who were killing Shigaraki. But I kind of think that's the same logic as Zack Snyder saying that Batman doesn't directly kill people in his movies. If he shoots the car that explodes, or if he causes the car to explode with people in it, then he's not directly responsible. That's kind of how I look at it. I still do think that Deku is responsible. Okay, so not to make another comparison to another manga, but I'm just going to do it real quick. In Haikyuu, the main way that characters get better is through hard work and dedication, like My Hero. There is a genetic component, just like My Hero, where if you are taller, you certainly have an advantage that people like Hinata and Hoshiumi do not. It doesn't make it impossible to be as good as tall players, but it does make it harder. Throughout the entire series, we see how hard Hinata works. He will keep working even when he has been playing volleyball all day. He will be at the gym early and leave late. He isn't the only one who puts in this work, but he certainly commits to this pursuit of getting better extremely hard. He crashes a training camp that he isn't invited to just because he wants to get better. Everything that Hinata does is because he wants to identify weak areas for himself and improve in the sport that he loves so dearly. So during his match with Kamemedai, when he gets a fever, it isn't out of nowhere. It's because he has now overworked his body and it has shut down. He has been working hard before this tournament and extremely hard during the tournament. He had the game with Nekoma right before, which was extremely physically taxing for him. None of the wins that Karasuno had had so far in that tournament had been easy. But one way that we have seen Hinata keep up with everyone else on his team, despite his size, is that he pushes his body to go faster, jump higher, and rebound quicker than everyone else. We see how Hoshiumi on Kamemedai has accounted for his short height by really honing in on his technique and psychology. There is no such thing as momentum type deal, and his technique is really great. This approach allows for longevity. Hinata's approach works in the short term, and because it seemed like he had endless sources of energy, it worked. But as soon as he went beyond his physical capabilities, he shut down. This completely changed his approach to volleyball going forward, causing him to go to Brazil after high school to learn beach volleyball, since that would help him with that specific issue that he encountered in high school. He took that lesson, sat on it, and went forward. What will you become tomorrow? Hinata learned that his approach wasn't going to work because he pushed his hard work and dedication too far. He learned that passion should never supersede taking care of his body. That is a good example of taking that theme, that approach to getting stronger, and having a negative consequence that ends up forcing improvement in a new way. Deku dips into the sacrifice approach to improvement, which just feels jarring because it is different from what he has been doing before this. and he could not take the negative consequences and improve. Hinata's negative consequence was well within what the series had already been doing. Deku's is not. Hinata shows that you can be punished for too much hard work and not knowing your limits. Deku's punishment comes from sacrifice, something, again, that we have really not seen him struggle with. This is kind of the panel where he kills Shigaraki. Like, bro fucking dusts him. Like, that, which is really funny. Like, that's how Bakugo kills All For One. Like, he, like, fucking, like, accelerates his body so much that he, like, just backward ages so much that he becomes like a single cell and then becomes dust. Like, these guys, when they kill hard. Like, no body. Like, nothing to bury. Crazy. Okay, another component of the final fights that feels different is the connection between the hero and the villain. Ed's relationship with his father is a complicated one that has changed throughout the series, initially starting as hate before coming to a kind of mutual understanding between each other. While father is not Hohenheim, they do have a connection between the two of them. And all of the homunculus have some kind of relationship with Ed or any of the main characters throughout the series. We see them frequently throughout, and all big conflicts are tied to them. We get to know greed really well. We get to know envy really well, like beyond kind of, like we don't get to know every homunculus quite as well. Sloth doesn't really have a whole lot going on. Lust dies pretty quickly. But gluttony doesn't have a whole lot going on up there. But, like we do, a lot of conflicts are tied to them. We get to know greed and envy really well. Envy's death makes me cry. Like, we get to know these characters really, really well, because of how frequently they pop up and kind of the relationship that Ed has. Ed specifically kind of has with all of them. Meanwhile, Shigaraki and Deku don't really have much of a relationship. They do see each other throughout the series, but every interaction between them is very surface level. Deku has many other villains that he deals with. Not all are tied back to Shigaraki or All For One. Because there's a lot of emphasis on training in My Hero, it feels like half of the fights between the students with some teacher involvement thrown in, which again drives home the idea that hard work and dedication are what give you strength, not sacrifice. But by the end, I found I didn't really have many strong feelings about Shigaraki or All For One. I pitied Shigaraki just like Deku, but I didn't feel much at all for One. Deku isn't even one to beat All For One, it's Bakugo. I think that the one of the strengths of My Hero when it first started was kind of how many characters there were, because you had access to so many abilities, all the students, like the training exercises and all that. Like, it made it really engaging and interesting. But kind of as time went on, I just feel like we only got to really know like only a couple people in the main cast really well. And I feel like that, that's even kind of reflected in Shigaraki. Like, yes, we know his backstory. We know, his childhood, and we know why All For One chose him and, everything related to that. But you just don't really feel like you get to know All For One and Shigaraki kind of as people very much, just because I feel like they're not in it a ton. Like Father, we don't see Father that much, but we don't need to see Father that much. Yes, Father is the big bad of Fullmetal Alchemist, but Fuhrer, King Bradley is more of the main villain that we see much more frequently throughout the series. We see his backstory, yes, and that's important, but what really drives home kind of like a lot of fear of him is how frequently he's there, because he is aware of what they're doing. They're constantly trying to work around him. He's on to Roy. He breaks up the group. He keeps Riza right next to him to kind of threaten Roy to be complacent and listen to him. So Bradley, or Wrath, feels like a much more omnipresent threat than Shigaraki does. It's just by merit of how frequently we see them. Okay, so sorry, I know that this is getting out of hand, and I know I initially thought I would just be talking about My Hero and Fullmetal, but I'm going to talk about another comparison real quick, because I feel like it shows my point better than I can explain it. So in Avatar, we do not see Fire Lord Ozai that much. We don't even see his face at all until season 3. But the viewer can feel his influence everywhere. We see the devastation that the Fire Nation has spread throughout the country constantly, and we know that the Fire Lord is one that is responsible for all of that destruction. Then, as we get to know Zuko and Azula more, we see how he has directly harmed his children in different ways. We don't need to see him at every turn to feel the devastation that he has sown throughout the world and even in his own family. So by the time that we finally get to see him and when Aang fights him in the end, we hate him and want him dead. With All for One, we do definitely see the destruction that he causes. He creates the Nomu, he creates Shigaraki, he has a lot of evil things done to his credit. But because of the importance that the show places on societal issues, there's a lot of problems that are not caused by All for One. A lot of the villains whose backstories we see become villains not because they feel a call to serve All for One, um, not because they think that they are mortally righteous in their cause, and no different like the Fire Nation soldiers. They are pushed out of society mostly because of their quirk and then start acting like villains. Some are eventually drawn to All for One for the promise of power or security, but they would have been kept being villains regardless. He just organizes everyone. And there are other gangs like Overhauls that are doing their own wrongdoings, mostly disconnected from All for One. Like, yes, he is kind of involved, but like not really on the the nitty gritty. All of Overhaul's men are loyal to Overhaul, not to All for One. So with the end of the Fire Lord Ozai's reign and putting Zuko on the throne, you don't think that the work is over. There is clearly still a lot to do, but that now that the biggest threat has been handled, they will be able to achieve peace because the person responsible for much of the death has been put in prison and stripped of his bending. In My Hero, I do not think that the biggest threat has been handled. I don't think society at large has learned its lesson. They will still push people to the outskirts of society for having weirdo quirks. I think that the system that let Endeavor become as powerful as he was, the one that created Dobby, is still in place. Deku is on the sidelines because he has no quirk and is absolutely less useful than his classmates that still have quirks. He's still contributing to society, but part of what made Aizawa such a good teacher is that he had a quirk that he could help his students through its use. Deku could probably teach kids math, but could he really keep up with a bunch of quirked up kids in combat training? Which is another reason why this feels like a punishment for Deku. I don't think he could do his job to the best of his capabilities because he doesn't have a quirk anymore. You can also only get so far in this world with understanding. There needs to be an element of practical application here when you're dealing with something as physical as a quirk. There's also the theory in My Hero that each generation of children has crazier and crazier quirks. So like the longer Deku is teaching, the crazier the quirks are, and I don't know. I just don't think that he may be. He can help on the theoretical, but I don't really think he can help too much on the practical. Okay, so one more comparison to another manga really quickly. In Hunter x Hunter, in the Chimera Ant arc, we see Gon sacrifice his use of Nen so that he can beat Pito, a situation that is very similar to the one that we find Deku in here. Now, while I have my own issues with the Chimera Ant arc and motivations that get characters to do the actions that they do, I cannot fault Gon for the mechanics of sacrificing his Nen. I personally disagree with Gon going this insane over Kite's death. I feel like he was friends with Kite, but not in a sacrifice all my Nen kind of friends with Kite. If it was one of his closest friends who died, like Killua, Leorio, Kurapika, then okay. If it was even his dad, then okay. I'm getting sidetracked. Within Nen, there is absolutely a feeling of sacrifice in everything that people do, since Nen is really shaped by what the individual wants it to be. There's an inherent sense of give and take. You find out in broad terms how you can generally funnel your Nen, and then it is up to you to make an ability out of that. We see Gon and Killua develop theirs and how they basically make a contract. When Gon kills Pito, he makes another contract, sacrificing his Nen for the ability to win this fight. So while I may disagree with why Gon did it, I do think that it makes sense within the power system. Gon is powerless and subsequently kicked out of the story. Sorry, Gon. Side note, isn't that crazy? Gon and Killua are probably in middle school. Leorio is getting his medical school hours, and Kurapika is the main character now, dealing with all this complicated Nen bullshit. Crazy how the story has turned. Anyway, Deku's sacrifice may be the most similar to Gon's, but it is not the same mechanically. Anyone can do what Gon did, and no one can do what Deku did. I'd also like to say that another power that has a lot to do with sacrifice is Kurapika's dolphin time. I don't exactly remember fully how it works, but I do know that it's like I know that he can only have it activated for a certain amount of time because it takes time off of his lifespan the longer that he has it on. And I know he uses it to protect the prince and his mother at one point during the whole succession arc thing, and I know he like left it on for like way too long and his life got cut like pretty significantly. So I know, it's like we, you know, when in Hunter x Hunter, when you're kind of making your power, you have to decide how much you're willing to give so that you can, get that in return. Kurapika's ability is very powerful, but it pays a heavy price, and he, has to be okay with that to get it. Gon pays the ultimate price and is severely punished for it, and we do not see him again. He like that sacrifice was permanent. He made the choice and we don't see him again. Like this isn't like they'll find a loophole to get him his Nen back because he's the main character. No, he's out. Like he paid the price. He made his choice and there's nothing that you can do about it anymore. So, sacrifice in Hunter x Hunter is a big theme and it is one that is extremely permanent. Much more so than My Hero. You have Bakugo, like, sacrifice himself and he dies. But then, Best Genist and the other dude, Ectoplasm, I don't remember his name. But, they, like, get his heart beating again, So it's like, it's two different kind of approaches to sacrifice and how permanent it is. Hunter x Hunter has one of the more permanent systems of sacrifice that we've seen. And you can just see the contrast between how it works in Hunter x Hunter versus how it works in My Hero. Okay, so I was originally intending for this to just be focused on the difference in endings between My Hero and Fullmetal Alchemist, but some other stories crept in. This may not be quite as focused, but I think I got my point across for why I dislike the ending of My Hero and how other stories did the same ideas better and why they were better. I still think of My Hero as a mostly mixed bag. It has some great characters, but I think that it has a lot of missed potentials within the story. I don't love the ending, and I think its epilogue is generally rushed as well. And I know it's not exactly a hot take to say that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is better than My Hero, but I needed to articulate my thoughts. Okay, thank you for listening to my ramblings. Had to put up one of the OG anime memes, and I found a One Piece version just for me personally. So, okay, thank you.